Hallelujah.
Hello, and welcome to my attempt at explaining the events and ending of BioShock Infinite. All the information in this video is purely my own speculation based on evidence from within the game and purely follows the timeline and or dimension line of the game. If you're confused about other issues that I don't cover here, feel free to ask, and either someone in the comment section or myself will get round to answering it. This video is made following the finale of BioShock Infinite, and should more or conflicting evidence arrive through the planned DLCs of the game, then please take that into account, and I may indeed make further videos or annotations with expansion or correction. Needless to say, this video contains major spoilers, and if you haven't completed BioShock Infinite yet, I strongly advise you stop this video now and go and enjoy having your mind blown to smithereens. If you've come for a little more clarity and or theory discussion in the comments section, then would you kindly sit back and enjoy the ride. The game's story is largely based off its own version of multiverse theory, that for variable outcomes of constant points, universes are created, as well as universes for every other variable. This leads to an infinitely generating and collapsing set of universes branching out from previous ones depending on the variable outcomes of constant points in that universe. The key constant and variable pertinent to the story of BioShock Infinite is the baptism, or not, of Booker DeWitt following the Wounded Knee massacre. This leads to a branch and two universes, hereafter called Comstock's universe, where Booker does get baptised, and Booker's universe, where he does not. Now, first of all, something people ask me is, if the branch is at the baptism, how are Robert and Rosalind different sexes, when obviously that is determined at, conception, and that happened a long time prior to the baptism. And the thing is, we're dealing with multiverse theory here. There isn't just one universe up until the point where Booker gets baptised. There are millions and millions. It just so happens that the baptism is a constant for all of them. So the diagram isn't so much like this, but much more like this. In Comstock's universe, upon being baptised to atone for the crushing guilt of his actions at Wounded Knee, Booker renames himself Zachary Comstock to distance himself from the past. In time, Comstock meets up with the brilliant quantum physicist Rosalind Lutece, and with her brain and funding from the United States government wanting to display its power as a rising nation, builds his dream of an all-white flying city of manifest destiny, Columbia. When the Boxer Rebellion in China breaks out, Comstock discovers that American citizens are being held hostage. On this, Comstock orders Columbia to open fire on China, considering them an enemy to American ideals. This act revealed to the world that Columbia was in fact a giant warship. The United States disavowed Columbia. Seeing this as a betrayal, Comstock seceded Columbia from the United States, and the city disappeared into the skies. Further experimentation by Lutece in Columbia leads her to make contact with a male version of herself from Booker's universe using Morse code derived from manipulating the wave function of a particle. Further testing and the combined intellect of the Luteces leads them to develop trans-dimensional technology in Columbia. Comstock begins to use this technology to see into different potential universes as well as time, and concocts his prophetic persona to the Founders, ignoring Lutece's correction that he's in fact seeing into probability rather than prophecy. Meanwhile, in Booker's universe, DeWitt rejects the baptism as superstitious nonsense and instead is left with his festering guilt. After working as the strong arm of the Pinkertons, he settles into a job as a private investigator, meets his wife and has a baby, Anna. However, Booker's wife dies during childbirth, leaving him alone to care for Anna. The death of his wife, his current struggling situation and the ghosts of his past lead Booker to turn to drink and gambling. He amasses massive debt to dangerous people. Years of exposure to the tears have left Comstock aging rapidly, sterile, and will eventually plague him with cancer. Wanting an heir, and an heir of his own bloodline, he goes to Lady Lutece, who suggests using their machines to find an alternate version of himself where he has a child, Booker. Of course, her ulterior motive in this is that she wants to make contact with the male version of herself. Robert Lutece is then sent to the desperate Booker with an offer. Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt. Seeing no other option, Booker caves and hands over Anna to Lutece. Immediately regretting it, Booker follows Lutece and confronts him and Comstock. However, he fails and the three of them disappear into Columbia. Anna's finger is severed by the tear during the scuffle between Comstock and Booker. Lutece later speculates that this is what gives Anna, now renamed Elizabeth, her innate ability to control tears. She is one person physically existing over two dimensions simultaneously, who's been split by a tear. Upon displaying her control of tears as a child, and the increasing erraticness of this after puberty, Comstock orders the Luteces to develop the siphon in order to limit, drain, and even utilise Elizabeth's power. Later, the Luteces would see into a future where Elizabeth's power is harnessed with the siphon, and Columbia launches an assault on New York, and maybe even the rest of America, the world, or other dimensions thereafter. Realising the mistake they've committed in creating Elizabeth's fate, Robert manages to convince Rosalind into returning Elizabeth back to her original timeline. When Comstock finds out of their plan, he tempts Fink into sabotaging their machines in order to silence them, making it look like an accident, so maintaining the image of Columbia's lamb, Elizabeth. However, the accident instead disperses the Luteces into pan-dimensionality. The Luteces then proceed to contact Bookers from many alternate universes where Booker rejected the baptism and bring him into the Comstock universe in order to set things straight again. Booker's crossing dimensions into Comstock's, thus starting BioShock Infinite, leads to his amnesia and nosebleeds. He suffers from two memories existing in the same space and time in his head. Booker's story and mission throughout the events of Infinite are largely his own desperate subconscious rationalisation of the cognitive dissonance of being both men in the same dimension, blanketed with the phrase that's been tormenting him for nearly 2 decades: bring us the girl and wipe away the debt. This is all reinforced by the Luteces' scheming. They hand him a box containing a photo of Elizabeth and likely put the note on the lighthouse door. You're far from the first Booker to try this. Lutece notes that it works, but will he? Referring to the method of transporting you across dimensions, and whether you can break the cycle, unlike all the Bookers previously who have failed. You also don't row. They are aware of the multiverse and have carried out these events numerous times. Rosalind asks Booker why he doesn't help row. Robert replies he doesn't row. Rosalind misunderstands him and thinks it means Booker can't or refuses. After Robert repeats it, she realises that he means that he doesn't row in this series of events. Note that the coin toss tally chart from the beginning suggests that the Booker you play as is the 123rd assigned to the task. The coin will constantly land on heads, but Booker's guess may vary. The choices the Luteces give you throughout the game are perhaps their own way of marking which universe they're observing. For every action you make in the game, there are countless other universes created where you made a different one. This also implies that when you die and aren't resuscitated by Elizabeth, you're merely adopting another Booker from another reality where he didn't die at that moment. Some people say that the choices given to you in Infinite are nowhere near as important as the previous 2 games, both of which had multiple endings depending on your moral choices throughout. But that's not the point. There doesn't need to be multiple endings shown to you. You only live one of the infinite number of possible endings. They're all happening constantly and simultaneously until the circle is broken, which you do. In the first universe you enter into at the start of the game, we'll label that Universe A, you travel to Monument Tower and free Elizabeth from it. You then go on to fight Slate in the Hall of Heroes. You are then enlisted by Daisy to go and arm the Vox Populi. You find Chen LIN killed, at which point Elizabeth takes herself and DeWitt through a tear. We must then go back to where the universe you travel to diverges from the one you are in. We'll label this universe A1. In A1, Elizabeth is moved to Comstock House before DeWitt arrives. DeWitt later teams up with Slate and the Hall of Heroes is burnt down. Importantly, Chen LIN lives. This is where you enter the universe. You find that Chen LI's tools have been confiscated by the police. Elizabeth then takes herself and DeWitt through another tear. We must again go back to where this universe diverged from the last. We'll label this one A2. In A2, DeWitt is killed and becomes a martyr for the Vox. Chen LI's tools haven't been confiscated, and the Vox revolt. This is where you enter the universe. After further adventure, Elizabeth is captured by Songbird and taken to Comstock House. DeWitt is then pulled into the future of this universe by an elderly Elizabeth. Because of this, DeWitt never comes to her rescue. Elizabeth has the control device implanted. Over the years, Elizabeth is indoctrinated by Comstock and goes on to rule Columbia. An elderly Elizabeth, no longer able to control Columbia, and in a moment of clarity brings DeWitt into the future and gives him a note for her younger self in order to save them both. The universe then splits here, because DeWitt is able to rescue Elizabeth and the control device is never implanted. DeWitt then kills Comstock and Monument Island is destroyed by the Songbird. Upon the destruction of the Siphon, Elizabeth again has her true capabilities unlocked and becomes seemingly omniscient and omnipotent. She sees all the dimensions and where they converge. She sees all the realities where Comstock rose to power and all the dimensions where Booker has failed to stop him, where her powers would eventually bring Armageddon. The never-ending loop that the Bookers are caught in. Always losing Anna, always getting to Columbia, always getting heads, always picking ball 77. A never-ending loop to save his daughter. Comstock is only dead in the universe you've experienced. There are still a million worlds where he is still alive and Elizabeth is allowed to suffer. It's not over because the Prophet is dead. It'll be over when he never existed. Elizabeth's suffering and eventual fate must be stopped in all realities where she exists. Elizabeth then takes DeWitt on the tour of the lighthouses outside of time and space. Booker will kill himself now, and every instance on every path shows DeWitt and Elizabeth walking to that end. In the final door, there is only one DeWitt, because all those divergent and fractured paths share a common origin. Booker and Elizabeth travel back to the point where Comstock is born, or rather, reborn, in order to prevent his existence entirely. Booker accepts the need for him to die in order for Comstock to never exist and for the infinite Elizabeth to never suffer, and so he allows them to drown him. They take the Bookers that accepted baptism and kill him instead. It's not a third option, but rather turning the variable of will he be baptized into the constant of no he won't. If you never put a cat in Schrodinger's box, suddenly all possible realities are just one again. In every universe possibly imaginable, Booker is not baptized. With that, Comstock never existed, Columbia was never built, and Anna was never stolen. Anything Comstock had an effect on was destroyed, and never happened. Where Booker and Anna may get the chance to live out the life together they should have had, the Elizabeth we came to know and care for makes the greatest sacrifice. She saw all the possibilities and was given two: stop herself existing, or watch as her tethered self would be used to rain fire on the world below in some other dimension. In the end, she was making Booker kill her, just as she'd asked in Emporia. And with the death of Comstock, so the death of all realities where Elizabeth could possibly exist.